The handyman had been inside the dojo for less than 5 minutes when the champion suddenly stopped training. The room was filled with the sharp sounds of bare feet striking wooden floors, heavy bags swinging, and students practicing complicated combinations, but all of it disappeared for the champion the moment he saw the stranger bend down to repair the broken door. The man was wearing faded work clothes, carrying a small toolbox, and looked like someone who had spent his entire life fixing things nobody else wanted to touch. Then he shifted his feet. Just once. A simple movement to steady himself while tightening a hinge. But the champion's face went pale. He knew that stance. He had seen it only once before, in an old photograph hanging in his master's office. The handyman wasn't standing like a carpenter. He was standing like a fighter who had once been nearly unbeatable. And if you believe kindness can give people a second chance, please like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Dad's Soul Diaries. Because sometimes the people who arrive to repair something broken are carrying broken pieces of their own. It was a bright afternoon in the town of Vermont, and sunlight streamed through the wide windows of the Golden Crane Dojo. The academy was preparing for the regional championship, and the atmosphere was intense. Every student wanted to prove themselves, but none more than 28-year-old Riven Cole, the reigning champion. Riven had trained since childhood and had built his identity around being the best. He had trophies, medals, newspaper articles, and a reputation for never backing down. His instructor, Master Halden Wren, respected his talent but often reminded him that winning a fight was not the same as becoming a great fighter. Riven understood the words intellectually, but deep inside, he still believed that strength meant standing above everyone else. That afternoon, one of the dojo's old wooden doors finally broke. The lower hinge had torn loose, leaving the door hanging crookedly from its frame. The academy needed it repaired before the weekend tournament, so the owner called a local handyman. A little after 2 o'clock, a man named Bram Alder arrived carrying a worn toolbox and a folded canvas bag. He looked to be in his late 40s. His hair was beginning to gray, his face was weathered, and his clothes had the stains of years spent working with wood, metal, and paint. He did not look like a fighter. He looked tired. Bram greeted everyone politely and immediately began examining the damaged door. The students barely noticed him. A few continued practicing while others whispered about the upcoming tournament. Riven was working on a difficult defensive sequence when he heard the scrape of Bram's toolbox against the floor. He glanced over once, then returned to training. Then Bram crouched. The door shifted unexpectedly. Bram moved 1 foot backward. His knees bent. His weight settled perfectly over the center of his body. His shoulders relaxed. His hands lifted just slightly. It lasted less than a second. Riven froze. He stared at Bram. The handyman straightened and continued repairing the hinge as if nothing had happened. Riven walked closer. He asked Bram where he had learned to stand like that. Bram looked confused and said that he had not done anything unusual. Riven insisted that he had seen the movement. Bram smiled faintly and told him that old habits sometimes returned when the body was tired. That answer made Riven uncomfortable. He asked if Bram had ever trained in martial arts. Bram paused. Then he said that he had trained a long time ago. Riven did not believe him. After Bram finished repairing the door, he packed his tools and left. Riven watched him disappear down the street. That evening, Riven went into Master Halden's office. He told him about the handyman. Master Halden became silent. Riven asked if he knew Bram Alder. The master opened a drawer and pulled out an old photograph. The picture showed a young fighter standing in the same stance Riven had seen that afternoon. The fighter was wearing a black uniform and standing beside a much younger Master Halden. Riven looked at the photograph. His eyes widened. The name beneath it was Arlen Voss. One of the greatest fighters the region had ever produced. Riven asked why the handyman's name was Bram Alder. Master Halden explained that Arlen Voss had disappeared 20 years earlier. He had been undefeated for nearly a decade. He was known for a fighting style built around patience rather than aggression. He could read an opponent's movement before the attack began. But his career ended after a devastating tournament. Arlen had been preparing for the national finals when his younger brother, Sayer, was injured in a serious accident. Arlen abandoned the tournament to stay beside him. His brother survived, but suffered permanent injuries. Arlen blamed himself. He believed that if he had not been away chasing championships, he might have noticed the warning signs that could have prevented the accident. He left martial arts. He stopped competing. He changed his name. And eventually, he became a handyman. Riven could not understand. How could a man who had once been a legendary champion spend 20 years repairing doors and broken furniture? Master Halden said that Arlen had discovered something that most young champions never understand. A trophy cannot fix a broken family. The next morning, Bram returned to repair another part of the dojo. The old storage cabinet had a broken hinge. Riven approached him again. This time, he did not ask about fighting. He asked about life. Bram looked at him for a long moment. Then he admitted that he was Arlen Voss. Riven was stunned. He asked why he had hidden his identity for so long. Bram explained that after his brother's accident, he could no longer see himself as a champion. Every time he looked at a trophy, he remembered the person who had paid the price for his success. So he gave everything away. He sold his house. He left his old friends. He stopped teaching. He spent years moving from town to town, repairing whatever people needed repaired. Doors. Tables. Windows. Fences. He said that fixing broken things gave him a strange kind of peace. Because he knew what it felt like to believe something was beyond repair. Riven began visiting Bram after training. He learned that Bram's brother was still alive and living in another city. They had remained close, but Bram had never forgiven himself. Riven also discovered something unexpected. Bram's brother had never blamed him. In fact, Sayer had spent 20 years trying to convince Bram to return to martial arts. But Bram refused. Until now. One afternoon, the dojo's youngest student, a 9-year-old boy named Tavin, injured his ankle during practice. He fell and began crying. Several students gathered around him, unsure what to do. Bram happened to be nearby. He immediately knelt beside the boy. He did not rush him. He helped him breathe. He showed him how to move his weight away from the injured ankle. Then he carefully supported him to a chair. Riven watched. The way Bram handled the child was exactly how he had once handled injured fighters. Gentle. Patient. Focused. Tavin eventually stopped crying. Bram smiled. Riven suddenly understood why Master Halden had always spoken about strength being more than fighting. Bram had spent 20 years believing that his greatest failure was walking away from the ring. But perhaps leaving the ring had allowed him to become someone even more valuable. A month before the championship, disaster struck. A storm damaged part of the dojo roof, causing water to leak across the training floor. The academy had little money for repairs. The tournament was only days away, and the students feared they would have to withdraw. Riven was devastated. He had trained for months. He felt as though everything was collapsing. Bram arrived the next morning. He looked at the damaged roof, then at the wooden floor. He quietly opened his toolbox. He called several local workers he knew. By sunset, the entire community had gathered to help repair the dojo. Some brought wood. Some brought tools. Parents brought food. Students cleaned the floors. Bram worked until his hands were covered in dust and his shirt was soaked with sweat. Riven worked beside him. For the first time, the champion was not leading. He was helping. That night, While they sat outside the dojo, Riven asked Bram why he cared so much about saving a place he had only recently returned to. Bram looked toward the building. He said that years ago, a dojo had given him a home when he had nowhere else to belong. Now it was his turn to give something back. The tournament arrived. Riven entered the championship carrying a different kind of confidence. He was still fast. Still skilled. Still dangerous. But he no longer fought to prove that he was better than everyone else. He fought to honor the people who had helped him become who he was. He reached the final round. His opponent was younger, faster, and extremely aggressive. The match became brutal. Riven was knocked down twice. The crowd shouted. Riven looked toward the corner. Bram was standing there. The former champion did not shout instructions. He simply placed one hand over his heart. Riven understood. Breathe. Stay calm. Do not fight from fear. Riven stood. He stopped chasing victory. Instead, he began reading his opponent. He waited. He moved. He defended. Then, at exactly the right moment, he performed the stance he had seen Bram use on the broken door. The crowd gasped. Riven shifted his weight, redirected the attack, and scored the final point. He won. The crowd erupted. But Riven did not celebrate immediately.